Hello everybody, welcome to Associate. My name is Wanko Ngoge. In today's show, we are blessed to have a special and wonderful guest. Her name is Hibaq and she is the Foreign Secretary of Somaliland's UCID party. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for coming to CBA TV.
No, thank you very much. Feel very welcomed and happy to take this interview. Thank you very much.
So you are a leader in this society, in this country. You are the Foreign Secretary of UCID party. How is it for you as a leader, especially that you are a woman?
It's difficult. I wouldn't say it's like an easy thing, but it proves that change can actually happen. So I feel like for me it's quite inspiring because I'm doing new things and things that probably a young female hasn't done before. So a lot of the time I have to take up new challenges. I'm constantly learning about politics and the way that politics works here. But also I think that for me, I feel inspired by the youth themselves, the amount of support they've showed me to like be able to push to the level that I am at today as well at the same time. So I feel like we both inspire each other. I inspire them, but they definitely inspire me as well at the same time.
Did you always look forward to being a leader? Like when you were a little girl, were you like, I want to be a leader in future?
To be honest, I started thinking about politics when I moved to Somaliland, Hargeisa, in 2010. I used to work for the Ministry of Public Works and Housing, and at that time I'd like had so many fresh ideas straight out of uni, and like I kept on getting told like this is not your job, this is the job of the politician and the minister of the ministry. And then at that point I kept on started asking questions, is like, what does it take to be a minister? And then I was told, first of all, you're young, and second of all, you're a woman. Yeah. So like basically just continue your job. And then I think at that point it was always my mission to like come back into Somaliland politics. But for everything you have to have a goal and a stepping stone to be able to get it. So like for me there was a road that I wanted to follow in terms of doing my career working. I'm an architect by profession, so I work for a construction company in the UK. So actually becoming like a leader in different ways in terms of my working career, learning a lot, learning how things work, and then being able to give that back into my leadership in terms of politics. I feel like you have to be quite self-made yourself as an individual before you can go into something to like politics and Somaliland politics to be able to start being a politician.
Well, here in Somaliland, not many women are taking up leadership and management positions, and you being a leader, many women would be looking at you and small girls and they're saying, what did she do different? What did you do for you to be recognized? Because people say for a woman to lead, she has to work extra harder than men.
Yeah, I think the first thing that I knew that I needed to do is to be a woman of her word. So instead of like continuously just talking about what I'm going to do or how I'm going to help my people and all of that, but I actually take steps in doing that and showing that like sometimes actions speak louder than words. I'm not someone that is quite a lot on like in terms of interviews, in terms of like broadcasting stuff, but for me I think it's more important of doing the work. So like I've spent the last 3 months making sure that I've got the groundwork set up so that I can actually have something to tell and something to speak about to the interviewers and the TV stations, rather than just expecting to come on here and just be the same. But I also think like females in politics, I definitely agree with you, we have to work twice as hard. But also I think the other side of it is like, because the women that have previously been in Somaliland politics, I'd be like, for me, there's like great inspirations and people that you can take from Adna Aden being a foreign minister. Like there's really good inspirational things and you can learn a lot. I'm reading her book at the moment that she recently wrote, and you can learn a lot. So I feel like one of the things that we need to do is even also looking at African politics, the leaders, the female leaders that have come past and what they've done, because I feel like that can teach you quite a lot about how to like implement in terms of your own communication within your people. But I would say that the thing that just stands me out from the rest is probably the amount and effort that I kind of put into the work that I'm doing and ensuring that like I stand definitely as a politician somewhat of having my own support system, having my own supporters, people that believe and understand what my ideology is, why I want things to change, how I believe things can change, and what I'm doing to change that, so that those supporters can also come to the table and ensure that they kind of now I've joined a new political party, and I've only been the foreign minister for 3 months at the moment, so it's not been a long time, but already there's been a lot of change within the political party itself. We just recently had our conference in Bur'a, and there's been a lot of engagement, especially from young people coming to the Xisbi and the party and starting to get involved. And I feel like that's one thing that you need to do is if you represent a certain class of people, you need to ensure that class of people are working with you, not against you. Because if they're working against you, then it's quite difficult for you to be able to show your political stature. If you're fighting for females and you're a feminist, but yet women don't support you. It's very difficult for what you're fighting for.
So how do you connect with these supporters? You said you need supporters. You have supporters already. You have young people who are supporting you. Are you a people person? How do you connect with them? Do you have time for them?
Yeah, so one of the things, like I'm quite active on social media, so I'm very active on Facebook. And one of the things that I always get is like young people telling me they're shocked that I reply back to them and I respond to what they're saying. But actually, like one of the things is, even when I was making the decision to move to come into this political party and take this position, it wasn't a thing that I'd made by myself. It was something I kind of went back to my supporters to say, this is the next step. Like, what do you guys think about it? And I think I got a lot of positive reactions from the young people that do support me. But also, like I've been here in Hargeisa for 8 days now. I went to Bur'a. I saw the young people there. We had dinner together. We've had dinner here. We've got dinner planned this evening. So like I'm constantly engaging with them, because if I'm their representative, I have to ensure that like I'm fighting the battles that they need fought as well at the same time. So the interest has to be something, I represent them. I represent them, and I have to ensure that they are being seen and being heard as well at the same time through my political party. So I'm always engaging with them. Even in the UK, I engage quite a lot with them, and I do a lot of live. So I do like quite a lot of like live Facebook stuff,
good.
And so then they quite ask me quite a lot of questions and like what's going on. But even when I go to like conferences and stuff like that, I introduce them to other youth as well. So my platform is not just a platform for myself, but it's also a platform to introduce Somaliland youth to each other, which I feel like doesn't really happen a lot. It's kind of like there's a platform, but they don't really know about each other. I've worked on organisations here in Somaliland for the African Youth Union Commission, which I've brought together 28 youth to be the Somaliland chapter. There's also like other organisations within Somaliland that I work with, just to ensure that we're all connecting and we're aware of what we need to be done. Because one thing I believe in is change is not going to come from anywhere. Change has to come from us.
We have to work for that.
The change has to come from us. There's not some group of people that are one day going to turn up in Somaliland and decide to change everything. I feel like this is our legacy. This is the future that's going to be left behind for us. So I feel like as the younger generation, we have to take hold of it now. And one of the sayings that I always believe in is like, we're not the future leaders of tomorrow, we're the leaders of today. Because if we don't start leading today, then tomorrow is not going to make no difference, because we're just going to go back into that same cycle of the ones before us. So like being told that, and being told as a young person that like your time will come, I'm a believer in my time is now, but I'm willing to work for it as well at the same time.
Okay, you being as a Foreign Affairs Secretary in UCID party, it means you travel a lot. You engage in so many diplomatic affairs. When you go out there, have you ever had a moment where people ask you, where are you from? And you say, I'm from Somaliland. And they're like, where is Somaliland?
Yeah, it happens a lot. It happens a lot, and weirdly enough, it happens a lot in Africa. So when I'm traveling in Africa, it probably is a lot worse, especially in West Africa and North Africa. In the UK, people don't really know about Somaliland, but I feel like one of the things that I'm a strong believer in is like, even before I took this political position, I was an ambassador for Somaliland. So I was representing as a Somalilander, going to conferences in Nigeria, in Morocco, and in the UK as well at the same time, and constantly making sure that people understand Somaliland's history. Because one of the things that a lot of the time is our own youth, Somaliland youth, don't know our history. They don't know we were a country in 1960 and that we formed a union with Somalia. Most people just assume that our history started from Somalia, being a part of Somalia, but there was nothing before. So I feel like one of the things that I do as well is I constantly ensure our own youth are educating themselves about their history and also their rights as young people, because a lot of people don't end up reading their constitution, nor do they read their laws, but they automatically assume they've had injustice done to them. But for you to know that you've had injustice, you have to know where to go to do that. And you don't have to be a lawyer to be able to read that. You can read it out and find out what your responsibilities and what your rights are. So one of the things I always do is I always constantly give them updates on things that people send me about Somaliland, and if it's like reports or like any information that's gone out. And then I kind of forward it on to them so that they're aware of what I'm learning as well at the same time. Because I'm constantly learning about Somaliland myself, and like traveling around Somaliland, you hear a lot of different stories about how once we joined the union, how we wanted to actually leave the union at that time, but there was quite a lot of other things going on at the same time. Is when I'm out there talking about Somaliland, I ensure that not only I engage with individuals, but I keep a continuous relationship with them. So I speak to them, ask them if they're in around Somaliland, if they're around East Africa, if they want to come to visit, that our doors always open for people to come and see us. So like doing that, I feel like not only just gives them a snapshot of Somaliland, but at the end they feel like ambassadors themselves, and they'll be going to somewhere and they'll be like, oh, like I was explaining to someone about Somaliland, and they were telling, I think it was a Nigerian businessman called Hakeem in Oxford University, and then I was telling him about Somaliland, and I was like, oh, I would love for you to come and stuff. And then he was just like, yeah, I used to have a friend, a Raga Oman's sister, like at a university, and she was from Somaliland in because this was way back when in 1950 something, I think they were going to university there. Yeah, so then he started telling me history about Somaliland and telling me how he was connected to Somaliland, and he was going to end up like marrying a Somali girl and all of this. So sometimes people end up, you end up thinking you're going to tell them history, and they end up, yeah, and they tell you your own history. So I feel like that's quite a good thing as well, to continuously learn.
Do you think Somaliland has good relations with other countries, and how are these relations like?
I feel like our foreign relationships with with countries around the world is, if anything, got worse in the last 10 years. I feel like one of the biggest issues that we have is not following up on like the communication that we have with the international community, and also not being seen in places that need to be seen. Like for example, we've got the African Union, which is right next door in Addis Ababa, but yet we're never mentioned in any of the annual reports that I issued out from the General Assemblies, the sit-downs of states. So like we have to we need to then start reflecting and questioning ourselves. Like we're not doing our job here. There's something missing. If we're not being seen in the international community, it's not because the international community has to show us, but we have to make it so that they do show us. So like after I leave Somaliland, I'm going to be representing the Ariel King Foundation in the UN General Assembly as a young ambassador from Africa. So like those are the things. We don't always have to attend and be a part of the international community on a government level, but we can do it on being ambassadors ourselves in terms of the communications that we have with the African Union and with the United Nations. So I think that what we need to do is we need to start now like taking responsibilities as individuals of how we represent our country, and ensuring that if you have friends, do your friends know about Somaliland? Do they have friends that could help the country? But if we're all going to work on one dimension and from one, it hasn't worked for 28 years. There's a reason why it hasn't worked, and it's not going to change that unless we change something. And I feel like changing that would be looking at ourselves and thinking, what can we do? How do we even like small things like report writers. We're not really like writers about like what's going. We expect other people to tell our story majority of the time. We have so many news stations here in Somaliland, but they're more telling people about internal stuff. But rarely do they go out there to the streets of like Hargeisa and the streets of Bra and then start speaking to people and look at the cave paintings and everything else about Somaliland that's beautiful and tell people that story. So I would urge them to help us even in terms of the foreign policy to start telling the story with us. And then also the other side, like the internet at the moment and social media is more stronger than anything. Like the power behind it is so strong, and we have 75% of youth here. If the youth should be the ones that are telling the story of Somaliland, and they're the ones that have access to it, but instead we're telling internal issues. So what we need to do is start changing that, start writing stories and telling stuff about how beautiful and how secure and the safety of Somaliland, so that other individual people end up coming and saying, oh, actually, I read a couple of reports. Because first thing anyone does today is, if you ask them a question or ask them about a country, I Google it.
Yeah, most of them imagine war and famine and hunger, and they're scared to come to Somaliland because that's what they get from the international media. Because the media here is not telling the good side of Somaliland.
No, I agree. And also, like, one of the things is the Google Drive. So like Google, it depends on the first 10 things that come up is a representation that someone will take. They rarely go to the second page on Google to find out what else is on there. So like we have to ensure that we're telling those stories, and those are the first 10 things that come out. So even when you go on YouTube and you type in Somaliland, what are the first most watched? There have to be positive stuff, because if there negative stuff about two people that are not happy about each other, then that's the perception that people are going to have. But and also like things like this, like I feel like what you guys are doing here is what's going to help us in terms of pushing forward, because a lot of our news stations are in Somali. So like how we're meant to speak to the international community or tell them about what they're doing. Today they're going to find out there's a young female that is in a senior political position. They might have not done that because of everybody I've spoken to, or the communications that I've had have all been in Somali.
Yeah, it has been mainly. Most of the media stations here, they broadcast in Somali language, and foreigners cannot understand it. Therefore, they don't get to know the good stories that are happening in the country.
So I feel like there has to be a balance of the two, and like my Somali is okay, but probably my English is better because I grew up in the UK. Doing foreign relationships and working with the international community, I need to have quite good English. So like I feel like we should expect that from our politicians that are in positions communicating with the international community, because that's the most basic in terms of communication that we need from them to be able to. How are they going to lobby for Somaliland if they can't even communicate with the individuals that are on the other side of the table? It will be difficult for them to do that. So it's either we need to just figure out like what are they saying, what because here when you come to these platforms, it helps you even for you to look back on some of the things that you probably never asked yourself, like the questions that you're asking me today, so that it kind of prompts you to think, what have I done? What am I doing at the moment? What about the people that I've spoken to? So I think doing things like this in English is a good thing for us to be able to put on YouTube.
Well, speaking of Somaliland being recognized, how far are we? Do you think it's going to happen anytime soon?
I think a lot has to change for us to be able to get recognized. I feel like the biggest issue that we have as Somalilanders, we always assume that the international community should do the right thing, should do the good thing, the thing that we've been peaceful for 28 years and we've had a stable economy and like we've got a new president, all of this. Politics doesn't really work like that. Politics is about self-interest and the interests of those parties that come to the table. And a lot of the time when we look at our interests as Somaliland, it's either we have our natural resources that we don't do nothing about, or we have resources that we're willing to sell off and not much return in terms of being able to get recognized. So I feel like things are starting to slowly change. Me and my team are doing a lot of lobbying at the moment in terms of the international community. I have a young group of youngsters that are ready, eager to kind of communicate and work. And what we're starting to do is starting to speak to countries that Somaliland probably might have never had a relationship with, because one of the biggest misleading concepts is that for Somaliland to get recognized, it's just about the leading 4 countries in the world, when it's actually not. It has to be the international community. It has to be something that's invested. The first country to recognize Somaliland does not have to be a rich country. It just has to be a country that's recognized by the international community. So like what we're doing is we're starting to lobby those governments, and we're starting to get feedback from countries like Rwanda and Sierra Leone, Trinidad and Tobago. So there are countries out there that are willing to communicate with Somaliland, but we have to, it takes doing lobbying and speaking to people can take years sometimes for you to even get to the table. But you have to be willing and committed to put in the work to go past them slow steps of back and forth emails and getting pushed to the wrong person. People are busy, and Somaliland is not their first priority. Somaliland is our first priority, but it's not theirs. So what we need to do is we need to start ensuring that it becomes our their first priority by engaging with them and continuously engaging with them. We've started engagements with the US lobby groups that can help us with in terms of lobbying in America, because things there are even more completely different than Africa. So I feel like what we need to do is work on how different continents parents work when it comes to political relationships. There's great stories like Taiwan, which has an enormous amount of countries that recognize it. But what we need to do is we need to start selling ourselves in a better aspect, and also following through with the people that we speak to. And I also think it's like giving space to young people that a lot of the time are willing to tell the story of Somaliland, because I feel like the story for so long has been told by the older generation, that when it comes from someone like me, I think people listen more. And when I stand there and I tell, I went to Nigeria, and when I tell 5,000 or 4,000 young Nigerians that I'm a leader in a country that is unrecognized, that inspires them and wants them to know what this country is, because there is something new and it's something different. Yeah, it's something new and something different. But I'm sure that if it was a 70-year-old man that's been in politics for however long and he's standing there, he's probably, English might be a bit broken. It's difficult for him to express probably what I would express. So I feel like in actual fact, being younger, it actually helps sell this reality of Somaliland, that we're a place where women and young people do have a say in their future and are able to, because there's a lot of countries that doesn't happen. There's no young people in politics or women. So yeah,
especially women in politics. So we'll take a short break. When we come back, we're gonna ask her, how has her journey been like? What are some of the challenges that she has experienced as a leader, especially a woman? Welcome back to Associate. We're here with the Foreign Affairs Secretary of Whig Party, Hibaq, and she's telling us about her journey as a leader in the party, and also what she's been doing to make Somaliland be recognized and for the world to know about Somaliland. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much.
So you as a leader, what would you tell other women who are afraid of taking up leadership roles?
I'll tell them it's not easy. You have to work double as hard as men, majority of the time. Especially the thing with politics anywhere in the world is kind of like you have to not just be thinking about this step, but like 3 steps ahead, because a lot of the time you would assume that like things will happen the way that you want it to happen, but where you start off today and where you are tomorrow is in a completely different position. So you have to like have also a plan and a fundamental of like basic of why you're doing this. Why are you taking this position, or why are you wanting to make change in your community, and how would this affect your community once you do it? Because I feel like a lot of the time, like when people do join politics, it's quite ad hoc. One day they wake up and they're just in their politics and stuff like that. But for me, I think it was like I kind of thought about why I was doing this and the reasons why I was going to do this, how I was going to do it, why I'm inspired to make change and all of that. So I feel like one of the things I would definitely tell them is like have a purpose, and it's not bad to be different. I'm diaspora. I'm not the most perfect speaking Somali person, as many people can tell, but I'm different, and I feel like sometimes being the difference is what makes you stand out from the rest. But if you're constantly just trying to fit into everybody else and what everybody else is doing, then you'll get lost in the tons of people that are wanting to join politics or be leaders in a community. So I feel like staying true to your grassroots and also like being different and being willing to work for that difference.
What are some of the hindrances that are making women in Somaliland not take up leadership roles?
Yeah, I think there's quite a lot of reasons why women choose to not take up leaderships for us. But one of the things that I'll say is the biggest one that I've seen is a lack of confidence. There's a big lack of confidence and like the need for men to like self-certify a woman's what she's doing and the way that her politics is and all of that. But I feel like sometimes if you come like within my party right now, I see being one of the senior people in the party, like I see myself as something that the party benefits from, benefiting from being in the political party. The party benefits from that as well. So I feel like one of the things that I would advise on for women especially is like be proud and sometimes it's okay to be a bit arrogant or like show off, because that's what politics is about. Like if you're an individual and you're trying to make change or you need to be quite, yes, I am the foreign secretary, because if you don't respect the title that you're taking or the position that you're leading, then the people behind you will not respect you either in that position. So I feel like one thing that I would say is, and I've learned the hard way around, because coming from the UK, we're not really like, they're quite polite and probably the politest people in terms of thing. But here, like, you come into a situation where you have to like show your worth. You have to be proud.
To prove that you really deserve this seat.
Yeah, and then also you have to like negotiate, because like I feel like one of the things that women do is we end up taking positions when they're given to us. We're less likely to ask for positions. So when I join a political party, I don't want the chair to give me a position that I don't understand, just because I'm willing to give him whatever chance he wants. I have to go to the table and be like, I have done this, and this is the best position that I see myself coming out and doing stuff. And that's what I did with the party. I actually suggested the foreign ministry, because that's what I've been doing for the last few years in terms of representing Somaliland. But it's very rare that you get that. It's more likely that a woman gets put in a position just by filling the quota or by luck or along those lines. But it's rarely that they'll go there and they'll be like, listen, these are the amount of supporters, this is the things that I can do, this is my history, my CV, and this is the position that I want. Because normally when you're in the real world, you apply for a position.
Yes, you
do. But in politics for women, I think it's slightly different. It's rare that women apply for positions. They normally just get positions.
Do the men in your party support you?
Yeah, I would definitely say the men in my chairman, Faisal Ali Warabe, actually the chairman he's a supporter of youth, and he has a lot of respect for me as an individual in terms of all of that. But also like that respect goes both ways, because I'm not an individual that needs anything specific from him, but I know how to do my job and I need his support as the chairman, which are completely two different things. A lot of the time, like, people get swallowed by the political party scene, because a lot of the time people expect quite a lot from the party itself in terms of like representations, movements, going places, connections, and all of that type of stuff. But I've been quite lucky in the time that I've been in politics, because I have like friends in senior positions in the continent, in Africa, and also in the UK. So I've actually used my own connections. Like, we just had a group here from the USA, and that came from my own contact. So like being able to showcase that you have your own support system, coming onto TV like this and being invited to speak, it just shows your worth as an individual in terms of that. And he respects that in terms of that. He's been in politics for a very long time. It is the longest standing political party in Somaliland. So he has experience, and on the other side I have like the wit and the kind of like energy and so I feel like we work well together based on that aspect. If we were both like quite laid back and been in politics for a long time, it would have been very slow the way that I was going. But within 3 months we've had a delegation here. I'm going to the UN General Assembly. We've got countries that we will be visiting in the next few months. So I feel like one of the good things is for him to show that. But also one thing that me and my team have done is we've actually wrote the foreign policy for the party. So like we've refreshed and updated the foreign policy for it, which is not something that political parties normally do. They normally talk about it in their manifesto, but no one actually puts like a document together that states exactly what they're planning to do and how they're going to plan to do it. I think there's a lot to do with also being held accountable for what we write. But I believe that that's the way forward. I feel like there's no change that's going to come unless you change things yourself. So we hopefully plan to issue our foreign policy with countries that we're going to be contacting, what we're going to be doing, what we stand for, and all of that. And also by the end of the year, hopefully in the next few months, actually sit down with the community and be like, these are the things that we've achieved, this stuff we couldn't achieve, and these are the reasons why we couldn't do it. But give them accountability and tell them like, this is the stuff that we've done. We're a new team. It took us time to set up the team, the policy, but we're ready to change the way that the system is done. So giving them monthly updates of what our process is and what we'll be doing. I feel like that's how change can come.
Yeah. What are some of the major plans you have? Are there any major plans that you have as a party?
I think in terms of foreign, I really believe that with the right attitude and the right work ethics, I think we can get a country to recognise Somaliland. I really honestly believe that we can do it, but it's going to take a bit of like changing the old previous system of how things have been done. We are working with the Somaliland Foreign Ministry, which is something completely brand new. No opposition party has worked with the current government on getting delegations here and working together on our foreign policy, but we as UCID believe country first, so our country is the most important thing. So if we have to work with the current leaders to show them like what we can do differently in terms of the way we can come across, I think that's what being opposition is about. It's actually making a change and bringing something to the table rather than just talking about what you would bring to the stage if you got the seat, because you don't need to be sitting on the government seat to be able to do work for your country. You can do that before you even get onto the seat. So by the time that you've got there, you've already done the stepping stones, you've showed the people what you can do, so you've got more like manpower. So I feel like that's probably one of the most newest things that we're doing at the moment, working with the foreign ministry. We do hope that our relationship could be much better than what it is at the moment, but we are ready to, like, even though they are the leading party and they're the ones that are going to take the goodness of what we've done, but we as the party believe that the most important thing is for the work to be done.
What would you comment about Somaliland's relationship with Somalia? Because for Somaliland to be recognized, Somalia has to recognize Somaliland first. Recently we saw President Musabihi, he went to Guinea, and it brought up a lot of negative reactions from Somalia. What do you have to say about that?
From my understanding, in terms of like in terms of our foreign policy and stuff, I think it's really difficult. I don't think Somaliland should be speaking to an unelected president, unelected parliament, because the reality is Somalia don't really have a mandate, or Farmajo does not have a mandate from his people. So what are we speaking to him about? Because clearly Musabihi does have a mandate from his people. He's been elected by the Somaliland people to sit on the table and fight for our recognition. So on the other side, there's not much to communicate with for some people that don't really even know like where they're going in terms of that. So what I would say is, personally, at this moment in time, unless there's a good foundation in terms of talking with Somalia, there's really no need to talk. But what I would say is Somalia's policies in terms of foreign policies is much aggressive than Somaliland's, and I feel like we as Somaliland can continue to wait for people to do the right thing in terms of our recognition. But ultimately right now what we need to do is fight fire with fire and be aggressive, because politics around the world, especially foreign politics in any country, is aggressive. They have lobbyist groups that work on their behalf. They have social media and like Fox News talking about what they're doing. They have people that are working constantly. We should have ambassadors that are like continuously knocking down the doors for our recognition. Those are the things that we need to do as a country to be able to combat the aggressive foreign, because Musabihi, the president, went to go see the foreign minister and they've cut ties with Guinea. That's quite an aggressive in terms of the way that it's an aggressive move. So I feel like we don't need to be as individuals aggressive, but our policy should be. And the way that I see the policy at the moment is there's no talks with the unelected cabinet of people that are representing with no mandate. But what we can do is we can be quite aggressive in terms of the way that we push our foreign policy. But first of all, what we need to do is produce a foreign policy that fits with the day, and because geopolitics changes all the time. Where countries stand today in alignment and where they stand tomorrow could be completely different. So I feel like it constantly needs to be updated, because at the moment there's quite a lot of stuff going on in terms of like China and Russia and America. So like I feel like we need to place ourselves in a strategic position to be able to benefit what we can for our people and our recognition at the same time. But that's constantly being reviewed and being updated, and countries that can work with Somaliland and that will work with Somaliland. So I feel like what we need to do is possibly put something together and then kind of be like, that's our mandate to go to work with, hopefully.
And indeed, we need aggressive people like you, women who are ready to speak, women who are courageous like you. And what you're doing is really great. You're really encouraging other women in Somaliland to be able to take up leadership roles, and we wish you all the best. Thank you so much for joining us on Her Associate. It was a pleasure having you, and we will call you again and again and again. And when you go to that conference, the United Nations conference, we wish you all the very best.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, gentlemen, we've come to the end of Associate. Thank you for watching. My name is Wango Ngoge.